Hello and taking. Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties Radio, Season 6, Episode 21. My name is Lee. I'm in WA. Joining me is Zeev in Melbourne and Vikas in Canberra.
Yeah.
Hello.
All right, this week we're going to be talking about two topics. We're going to talk about the religious discrimination. I am just so good with the English today, I'm really nailing it. So let's try that again. We got two topics.
You want to try it in a different language? You want to?
Maybe I should. Maybe
Swedish.
I should. Yeah, Swedish, Martian, Auslan, interpretive dance. We're going to talk about the Religious Discrimination Bill, and we're going to talk about the case of a Tamil family who are being the government's trying to deport them, and the protests that have come up around that. So let's start off with the Religious Discrimination bill, the exposure draft that the government's released. There's been a lot of discussion. There was an inquiry done by Philip Ruddock, former Howard era minister, a few months ago. It's now produced a draft that essentially brings in religious discrimination into kind of the existing anti-discrimination framework.
Or as I like to call it, blasphemy laws too, electric boogaloo.
Well, okay, that's a good question. I think we'll definitely have to go into that because I think that is... There's truth to it, but I don't know if that's exactly right. So basically, what the government is trying to do is treat religion under the same realm as sex discrimination, with one slight alteration, which is around larger organizations. So government businesses that have, I think it's over $50 million in revenue, have one element that's goes beyond the existing frameworks. So how about we just sort of, I think we've probably covered this sort of thing before, this anti-discrimination law before, but what are your thoughts about it, gentlemen?
As usual, I oppose these kind of laws, and I oppose the people that bring up these kind of laws. I am tough on the causes. I'm tough against these laws and tough on the causes of these laws.
That's why we get a because.
Yeah. No, I'm just there going I know I had this lined up. But yeah, look, from my perspective, it's going to be a shit law anyway. Look, effectively, this is a conservative response to the Israel Folau thing, which I'm still surprised is not a Jewish pastry of sorts. But I'm sure I'll get over that at some point. But the point is, this seems to me like they're kind of trying to create this law to prevent that kind of situation where, a particularly religious person says, look, I actually agree with the Christian conservatives on this. Israel Folau didn't actually say anything that was controversial to a Christian.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are fire and brimstone Christians that believe this kind of stuff. And look, I kind of sit there going it's the way the cookie is always crumpled. If you rock the boat in your workplace, you're probably going to lose your job.
Yes.
And that's the way it's always been. So when Christians go oh, hey, it's now not all right to profess my sincere beliefs, I'm there going yeah, but it's been that way forever.
Probably not. I mean, I guess this is...
probably not for Christians, but
probably for Christians. But certainly, Muslims or Jews or,
anyone else,
yeah. So...
Yeah.
I guess I can chime in here. I agree with Vikas. This is, the anti-discrimination bill is basically a rehash of anti-discrimination legislation that has been put out before, except this time it's been implemented to protect a new minority of sorts, or a majority, they might say, I don't know, the Christians. And as Vikas said before the show, effectively, it's a bit of a blasphemy bill, because it means that people can't discriminate against other people for expressing their religious views. Effectively, those religious views have legal sanction, and if an employer of a large business chooses to disassociate themselves with someone who has an extremist religious perspective, or perhaps a very ordinary religious perspective, they will now face legal penalties for doing so, which in some ways are reminiscent, although much less heavy-handed than historical blasphemy laws that would punish people for recanting from, I don't know, accepted religious doctrine. I mean, there are
I would strongly disagree with the notion that it's a blasphemy law. So, I mean, I'm against them as well, and I'm against this as well, just to be clear. But I think the difference
it's a remote link, but the link is.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I mean, they're very. So, for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about. So, blasphemy laws essentially it's illegal to criticize a religion. In our current context, it's usually Muslim countries for criticizing Islam. I suspect. I think. Well,
actually, so New South Wales only very recently got those kind of laws off the book. They were still on the books back when I was at school.
Yeah.
So when the World Catholic Conference occurred in Canberra, in Sydney back in the early 2000s, there was a big deal made about, hey, you can't criticize Catholics because there's a $5,000 fine under the blasphemy laws. So New South Wales only recently got rid of it. So saying that it's particularly relevant to the Middle East is not technically accurate.
Yes, it's not. I mean, not even the Middle East, because Pakistan, I think. They have blasphemy laws.
Well, India has it too.
Yeah. So most of the countries that I know of are Muslim, but I'm sure, Hindu countries or Buddhist, there's probably even Buddhist countries. I know. Well, in Thailand, you can't criticize the king, who is a religious figure of sorts. So there's some variations on it, but basically, you can't criticize a religion. This is not that. This is saying that you cannot fire somebody because of their religious views, and particularly, probably the closest it does come is that there's restrictions on businesses which have revenue over $50 million, where you can't. Basically, it's to do. Essentially, this is specifically for the Israel-Folau situation, where it stops people from kind of commenting on people's private activity. So I think that's kind of where it verges the closest in this regard. Essentially, it includes protected. Like if you are, say, a famous rugby player and you say gays are going to hell, a theoretical rugby organization which has a revenue of over $50 million could not, penalize you for that.
Not so theoretical, I suppose.
So for me, the real test would be take a radicalized Muslim in orbit, right? Who's very much against, who's taken a particularly strict version of Wahhabism, which means, he believes in the Ummah, and he accepts that all people outside of the Ummah are infidels and worthy of stoning, etc., 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 or whatever the harshest penalties are under the Hadith and Quran. Is that person's view legally protected now? That would be my question.
See, this is the immediate thing I thought of when I sort of heard the nature of the legislation, which again is just, if you've seen any anti-discrimination legislation, it's very similar. Aside from that one clause about the $50 million revenue organizations. This is going to have so many unintended consequences that all of these knobhead conservatives who are pushing for this thing will not begin to believe.
What about cannibalism?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the thing. Okay, sex things are a relatively, you can sort of talk about sex and gender and stuff in a particular sort of format. There's a limit to kind of how it operates, and particularly sex discrimination law. It's very specific.
What if my religion wasn't to pay taxes?
I mean, it's hard to say, we're going to create a new race of people. They did try to do that in Germany. It didn't work out so well. But, it's very specific. Religion is just incredibly complicated. If I just, think about, the spaghetti monster people. Think about Jedi. The people who want to make Jedi a religion on the census.
By the way.
When you've got sci-fi novelists like Ron L. Hubbard creating religions. Religious belief is so much broader than any of the discrimination.
That's true.
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to say I agree with you on this principle, right? And this is exactly why you shouldn't try and legislate discrimination law this way. And that's exactly what they did in the Sex Discrimination Act with respect to gender, and that's creating a whole bunch of shit for us now with the trans community.
Yep.
So you need to be specific, and that's something that probably needs to be called out.
But the thing is, the issue is, sex discrimination because I mean, even people who are big on promoting, like the idea that gender is fluid or is a social construct, which I would see myself as generally. Sex is very specific. It is biology. So, you have males and females that intersex and that kind of stuff.
But that's not where they're going with the Sex Discrimination Act.
Well, no, I agree that people are trying to change it, and that's a separate discussion. We can get into that some other time. But, like, I think in terms of... what was my original point?
Your point was religion is broad.
Yeah, religion is broad.
And they haven't possibly comprehended exactly how someone can dick around with this.
That was where I was going to go. So the problem is, so you can define sex even under sort of pretty radical terms, pretty straightforward, men, women, and then intersex and kind of a variety of sort of conditions in that regard. Race, similarly, you can sort of define race. It's a little bit tricky, I think. But, generally speaking, I think, but like defining religion, like that's ultimately the end goal of having to try and get into this stuff. Is the High Court will need to, which they have to probably already. Like I'm sure that if we went into constitutional history talking about religion and particularly the interaction between like the kind of implied protection of religion in the Constitution, there's probably some definition there, but this takes it even further. This requires an even stronger definition of what religion is.
Not just that,
but what I would want to add though,
dangerous in terms of the expansion of state power, because unless you're just going to leave it to the courts, which I suspect conservatives will not want to, because
they're
like
activists,
the Muslims,
right?
But they do like the Christians. Like it's going to get tricky.
What this is in some ways a form of it's an intervention into the personal affairs of ordinary people by the government.
Yes.
And that's why it should be opposed. Basically, I mean, you or I may or may not regard Israel Folau as a decent human being, maybe I would have a problem with what he said, or maybe I wouldn't. I don't really care for the purpose of this discussion. Although, lots of people think that gays and whatever should go to hell. It's not my perspective, but I don't really see how that's new, as long as he's not harming anyone else. I tend not to lose too much sleep over that perspective. And I think that one of the problems with social discourse today, the culture wars, has been that people tend to harass and persecute pretty much anyone that voices an opposing perspective. And it goes quickly from social criticism and shaming to tarring and feathering, or so to speak, to using the law to punish people. And that's what's happening in this scenario. Israel Folau was let go because his employer didn't want to be associated with him, and that's fair enough. Maybe I wouldn't either. Or on the other hand, maybe I would. I can't really, that's not the point. The point is it was the employer's right to make that call, to my mind. And now the government is saying, well, sorry, it's not. And it doesn't matter to my mind whether someone's expressing a view over gender and sexuality or religion or anything else. It's up to the employer to make the call whether they want to continue to employ someone.
Can I just jump in at this point, because I just want to point out something very very ironic potentially about this legislation, which is it's Section 8 of if you look at the exposure draft, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Subsection 3 talks about that basically the relevant employers cannot impose or propose to impose a relevant something that have the effect of restricting or preventing an employee of the employer from making a statement of belief at a time other than when the employee is performing work on behalf of the employer. That is, if you're on Instagram late night, you can post about how you hate the gays, but here we go, Section 4, this does not apply in relation to a statement of belief that is A, malicious, B, would likely to harass, vilify, or incite hatred or violence against another person or group of persons. So it's entirely possible that under that part, because Folau is potentially vilifying gay people, he would not even be protected by this legislation, which is kind of hilarious. Just putting it out.
That's legislation is intended to prevent. That's the irony. In fact, it's intended to overwrite Tasmanian law for specific specifically this purpose, because there was this controversial case in Tasmania of an archbishop advocating against gay marriage, and someone brought a complaint that they were that this archbishop was discriminating against gays in publishing the non-gay marriage pamphlets. So the reality is, all of these laws, all they do is allow some scope for judges to interpret them in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
And if judges have leanings and political views like everyone else, and if they lean in favour of what shall we say, a more progressive perspective, then the laws would effectively be defeated by interpretation.
How ironic that a conservative movement that was so against a Bill of Rights because it would lead to activist judges deciding what rights people have, to then come and put a bunch of legislation that would have judges deciding what people.
Yeah, but conservatives tend to be reactionary anyway, so this isn't anything new for them.
Yeah, just a year or two ago, the debate was over: should we allow people to offend one another within the context of political debate about race and so on? Well, I'm pretty sure what Rugby Australia did might be regarded as offensive to the supporters of Israel Folau, but at the same time, aren't they allowed to be offensive? I don't know.
I think they want to invite Milo Yiannopoulos to Parliament House. I think.
Oh yeah.
You're allowed to be offensive.
Right.
All right. Well,
and I was
sorry, Vikas, if you want to make a final comment, and then we might sort of move on.
No. I think everything about this has been said.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about the Tamil family. So I'm not going to try and say their name because I'm not very good with Sri Lankan names. But there's a Tamil family who have been recently just moved to Christmas Island in the process of them trying to be deported. They were in a small town in Queensland. They had sort of had 2 children while they've been on their asylum visa, and the government is now trying to deport them. And there's been a wave of protests. So the people in the town, even Alan Jones, Radio Shock Jock, normally not the friend of asylum seekers,
definitely not
spoken out in their defense.
So here's the thing. Canada has this really great system which allows people to pay a bond and effectively sponsor their own refugee if they want to. These are all people that the government has previously cleared. That kind of program is specifically what would help out these kind of situations, right? These people are integrated into that town, right? They're part of that community. I'm pretty sure that community could have put up that bond really quickly, right? They could have raised the money for that bond, and they could have like effectively sponsored these people through. But because of the stupidity that is our refugee system, they came in under the old temporary protection visa system or something like that. I know that we don't really have them anymore, but the point is they came in when there were temporary protection visas, and now what's happened is there's been a security assessment on Sri Lanka where they're saying it's fine for Christians to go back to Sri Lanka, right? So the government's advice is it's fine for them to go back, but these people don't really, like, both their kids were born here in Australia, right? They were uprooted from Sri Lanka when they came here. There's nothing for them to go back to. Right? So I sit there and go, like, this was always the problem with the TPV system, is that it didn't account for reality. It accounted to something that conservatives believe, which is like, hey, if someone's in trouble, you let them into your house, and then after their place is back to normal, you let them go back home. That's not reality. That's not how it works. These people are leaving their homes. Their homes are burnt down. They're gone. Right? There's nothing for them to go back to. So yeah, like I said, it's just stupidity. This policy has been stupidity in the past, and we like the thing that would fix it in future is, hey, let's allow people to sponsor these people.
Sponsorship is a good idea at the end of the day, and it's an idea supported, as far as I can tell, in our political landscape. The Greens maybe are the only ones that voiced any level of support for this policy, which is ironic because it involves people using their own money to, rather than using taxes. But okay, sorry, I'm being taking a little bit of a dig at the Greens there, but in the process of praising them. But in all seriousness, using this kind of system of people that the current system simply does not help, and there's no real reason to deny these people refuge here. At the end of the day, you just got to ask yourself, what is gained by it? I mean, they've literally opened up an entire detention facility on Christmas Island to house 4 people right now. And they've spent tens of millions of dollars to house 4 people on Christmas Island. And you just got to ask yourself, why? Yeah. What's the gain in any scenario?
Well, the gain
is looking tough. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
no.
That's the entire...
Yes,
the entire shtick of the Liberal Party on this issue is we need to be tough, we need to show how strong we are, so we don't encourage people to come by boat. I mean,
sure,
yeah,
and look, that's sorry, cough there. But that's been largely successful. I mean, we're still getting some boat arrivals, but it's not very much.
Yeah. I mean, and some of that, I think, just to interrupt, like the time when these people came in 2012, 2013, which is probably around the height of it, like from my recollection. And lots of these asylum seekers were coming from Sri Lanka when there was a civil war. Unsurprisingly, when your fiance has been burnt alive in your village, which is what happened to the wifeys in this context, you know, like I wouldn't want to stay.
Yeah, and it's remarkable, really, that we're asking Tamils to go back to Sri Lanka in the wake of the civil war. It's just. Extraordinary.
So the main reason why the security assessment. So this actually went all the way to the High Court, and it wasn't the full bench of the High Court, but it was what's the version? What's the non-full bench version of the High Court? I don't know.
I didn't know the decision.
Yeah. Whatever it was,
it went up. A lawyer sometime.
Yeah, we should probably ask a lawyer. But anyway, it went up.
Well, show me the decision. I'll tell you who heard it.
It's okay. Just kidding.
Yeah. So anyway, look, it was in the media. Look, I'm going to bring up
a special leave application and denied, maybe.
Yeah, it was a special leave application or something.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was reported in the media, and we really need to draw a Venn diagram of this. There's people who are saying that the George Pell decision by the courts was wrong, while simultaneously saying the courts are right when they denied the leave application from these people. So I'm there going like, guys, come on, the courts can get it wrong. So look, I think what needs to be done. Sorry, I think what needs to be coming here. What people need to understand about this is there is a process.
Yeah, special leave.
Gone through. Yeah. So there is a process that's been gone through for these people, and the government has determined because they're Christian Tamils, right? They're Christian Tamils. They've determined that there is no risk for these people back at home. Now, that's probably not true, right? Just because, like, the circumstances which have come out about, like Lee said, one of them had someone. Was it the fiance?
It was the wife. Yeah,
so it was the fiance of the former fiance of the wife.
Yeah. Oh wow!
So they actually came separately. I think they met after they. Arrived in Australia, or arrived in the detention, whatever process they went through, they met after that point.
Yeah, so that's my point, right? Like, I'm sitting here going, like, I don't think it's probably safe for them. I think even if you did send them back, there's probably nothing for them.
I mean, to be fair, okay, so to take the more, I says, strictly libertarian line, the thing is they've been around for, a few years. They've done nothing, to the best of our understanding, not being reported for some sort of criminal behavior or general, malice or bad faith dealings with anybody. Like, they've basically come here and lived peacefully and done their thing and be part of a community, and that's all that's required to be acceptable in any kind of libertarian framework. Like, at most, if you sort of have a libertarian framework, you say, well, we're going to deny people the right. I wouldn't security threat or like communicable disease. Yeah. So, like, if we think you're planning to mass murder everybody, we won't let you in. That seems like not insane. And if you have got, the Black Plague, we're not going to allow you to bring it in. We might hold you separately for a bit and then, wait for you to recover and then let you in. That's basically the most you could justifiably in any kind of libertarian framework do to stop somebody from coming in. So, like, from my perspective, and what I think should be a libertarian perspective, these people have done what is required of them. They have lived peacefully amongst others. And so, like, even if there's no threat, like even if they were going to be welcomed home in Sri Lanka with a ticker tape parade, even if they were going to give the keys of the city, if they want to stay in Australia, they can stay in Australia, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So I mean, I have noticed. So there were articles that had come out saying like, oh well, if these activists win on keeping these people here, then it'll open the floodgates for all future refugees. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, maybe. But what's the actual downside to that? I mean, we don't actually get.
No, more people who are going to come in and live here peacefully and be a part of a community. Damn, we don't in a remote part of Queensland. Like it's not. I don't think they're even in the city. They're in like. I mean, that's the big hype thing, which anti-immigrationists. They're like, oh, the cities are so full of people. Well, these people live in like regional Queensland.
So, yeah, that's my point. It's like I was there going like, okay, so let's pretend we get a flood of people. They're going to far north Queensland, which currently has a large requirement for populations to actually help out on farms.
Yeah.
They're not causing trouble, so I don't see the downside.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you know what? Maybe that's
brown because that's why they're brown. We can't let the brown people in.
I guarantee you, people in far north Queensland do not care about brown people. They are brown themselves, if not black.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing, I think, in terms of like, just as an aside, a historical side, like a comment I've heard by people who sort of understand history in the US. Like people in the South are much more comfortable being around black people, even though they had like this terrible racist regime, than people in the North, where it was much more white. So. Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I imagine the way people refer to races in North Queensland is probably not as PC as it would in the city, and yet they're probably more comfortable with brown people.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, like the funniest conversation I ever had in far north Queensland was this guy goes like, this guy was not a North Queenslander, or sorry, not from that area, right? Like this is someone else who'd come from a different area. He was working on the same project as me, and he goes like, you talk you talk English pretty good for an Indian. And I'm there going like, righto. And the far north Queenslander guy who was on this project as well just laughed his ass off. Yeah. He was just there going like, yeah, that is the best response for that. Because, like you talk English real good. Righto. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What else was I going to say?
I mean, yeah. I guess you guys were run by the Brits, so theoretically it should be possible. All right. Any final thoughts about this case? Is there anything
Just another example of the institutional framework we have, our legal system really just letting people down. And we really shouldn't assume the laws in this country are sensible or safe to adhere to at all times, because they're not.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I'm a huge proponent of liberal fascism. So keeping that in mind, right? Liberal.
I don't even know where to begin.
Because there's no way you can talk this way.
Let's save that one for another week, I'd say.
Okay.
Keep going.
No.
Thank you for that.
I should do a huge explanation of what liberal fascism is.
Not right now.
Okay.
Later.
Not right now.
Is this the Jonah Goldberg book that have you read that now? Is that why you've?
Oh no. This is a liberal framework to promote fascism. So Goldberg's book is about how lefties are actually fascists. What Vikas is talking about is how we can justify fascism under a classical liberal framework, basically.
What I'm saying is we take over the world and leave everyone alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very simple.
Pinochet.
Basically. All right. Thank you. Very insightful.
No. Anyway, let's keep going.
That chat.
No. Sorry. So just to get to where I was going, right? Under a liberal fascism framework, right? Everyone is equally a subject of the fascist state.
Okay.
So, keeping that in mind,
something to really aspire to.
Boot on everybody's necks equally.
Lovely.
That's the quality of mankind.
And on that happy note,
Vikas is the reason why conservatives are afraid of brown people, because they come into our country and like, I want to improve the jungle. Thanks for that. Thanks for providing my own case. All right, and with that stunning revelation, we will finish this week's episode of Taking Liberties Radio. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next week.
Okay.
See you next week.